Hello everybody, my name is Cogline3639. Welcome back to another video. Today in this one, I want to talk to you about the most recent ban list in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the September 2023 ban list if you're watching this in the future. And it was kind of an underwhelming list. There was only one ban being in Castria Riseheart, two limits being Bestial Magnuma and Chaos Space, and then two unlimits in Herald of Orange Light and Salamangreat Gazelle. That was the entire list. That was 5 changes, exactly. That was it. This was a very small list. And a lot of people don't like this list. There was comments in my reaction video saying this was probably one of the worst ban lists people have ever seen. Now, I don't know if I agree with that. I think there has been more worse ban lists than this list, but I want to cover this ban list. I want to cover 3 main points. 1, why do people hate this list? Number 2, why did Konami decide to make it a small list and not, try to change things up? And number 3, is this ban list overhated or is it actually just a bad ban list? So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So why did people hate this ban list? I have 3 reasons for you. Number 1, it was a small ban list. This is the smallest ban list we have had since the summer of 2020, which, that was COVID was starting up, so they kind of had an excuse for not having a ban list then, but we've had only 5 changes this list. We're used to having multiple ban cards, multiple limited cards, and a multiple semis and unlimited cards. This ban list only had 1 ban card, 2 limited cards, and 2 unlimited cards. They didn't even touch the semi-limited list, which honestly is a good thing when you ask me, but they didn't touch that whatsoever. So I think that's one of the reasons why people hate this list. Number 2, it doesn't actually change much when it comes to the current metagame. The only ban that matters when it comes to the metagame is Castria Riseheart. This card was kind of a problem. It's a walking floodgate being a macrocosmos, and is a interruption card by being able to banish a card face down from your opponent's field, which is kind of a dumb thing to do. This card was very good in making Cast the popular deck for like the past 6 months, so there's a reason why this guy hit. But in terms of all the other hits, they don't really change anything. I'm going to pull up the results of YCS Vancouver. This is the top 16 you can see right now. As you can see, Unchained is the most represented deck in the top 16, and Unchained did not get hit in this list. So, that probably is still going to be one of the better decks. As you can see, Dragon Link is number 2, which did get a hit as well. Number 3 is Purely, which again did not get a single hit, so you can probably still expect that deck to be there. Castria is number 4, which, the Riseheart is now gone, so you can probably expect that to go lower. But as you can see with the other decks here, that's, in the smaller things, Labyrinth did not get hit. Infernal is surprising to see there, to be honest with you. Sprite did not get hit. Rescue Ace did not get hit whatsoever. So those are probably decks you can expect to still see play in the next format. So, besides the Castria Riseheart being banned, it does not change that much when it comes to the metagame. You might be thinking, well, Dragon Link got hit with the Chaos Space and the Bestial Magnuma going to 1. Those are consistency changes. Like, they don't hit the overall power level of the game. You have to think about it. Bestial Lebellion is still at 3, so Bestial Magnuma is searchable in this deck still, so that probably doesn't change that much. You can also increase the other Bestials like Druisworm and stuff like that. And Chaos Space, which is a hurt to consistency, there's not really a card that can replace this. Dragon Link has enough cards where you can kind of put him in the Chaos Space slot and it still would basically do the same thing that it was doing before. So overall, since Dragon Link did get hit, but they should still be able to do the same things they're doing. Like Seal still exists, by the way. And a lot of people were saying that card should get banned. I disagree with that, but that's not the video for this. So yeah, overall, the meta the TCG meta should not change that much when it comes to the metagame. Only a Riseheart is the only one that matters. Number 3, problem cards did not get hit in this list. People were climbing for a Dimensional Barrier ban, an Eradicator ban, and a Calamities ban. Those did not happen. Now let's go off with Eradicator first. Labyrinth is really the only deck that can take advantage of this. And as you can saw by the top 16 pie chart, Labyrinth was not that much of a popular deck, at least in the top 16 to, you know, maybe it was more represented down, but as you can see, Labyrinth wasn't really making the top cut. So Labyrinth is kind of in a weird position right now where it's actually not as good as people think it is. So maybe that's why Eradicator didn't go. So there's that. Calamities only can exist in one deck in Manadium, and Manadium wasn't even in the top 16 of Vancouver, but people were still clamoring for this card to get banned just because it shuts off the game and it's kind of not fun to play against. But it is getting a reprint in the Jack Atlas structure deck, so probably that's kind of the main reason why this card didn't get banned. Dimensional Barrier is a weird card because this card does shut down a lot of decks, but if you look at the top deck of Unchained and Dragon Link, those decks don't get hit by D-Barrier. They're playing Links. You can't call Links off D-Barrier, so those don't really do anything to that. Castria, I mean, they can kind of just play their main deck monsters. Labyrinth doesn't really care for it. Runic Sprite has multiple ways to do stuff, so like calling fusion's kind of not that great for them. Rescue Ace doesn't really care for D-Barrier, so like overall D-Barrier, even though if you're playing a deck that dies D-Barrier, it fucking sucks. The top 16 proved like Dimensional Barrier didn't really do anything in this meta, so maybe that's why they didn't ban that card. But with Calamities, D-Barrier, and Eradicator not getting banned, it kind of pissed people off. They wanted these cards to get banned, even though I kind of made the arguments of why they didn't get hit, but a lot of people were expecting these cards to get hit, so maybe that's a reason why they hate this list. So why did Konami decide to keep this ban list a fairly smaller ban list? I think there's really only one reason for this, but I think the one reason is kind of a main reason why they didn't decide to do so, is because a lot of the decks in the meta right now are fairly newer decks. Think about it. Unchained was the most represented deck in YCS Vancouver, and it didn't receive a single hit. Why is that? Is because the deck before Duelist Nexus didn't exist. It was a bad deck before Duelist Nexus. Obviously, Duelist Nexus released their new support in Shavara, Yama, and Shama. But before that, the deck was garbage. So why would you want to go after a deck after they just got their new support, is now fairly doing good? Why would you want to go hit that deck straight away, right? So really no point in doing that. Same thing when it comes to something like Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace just got their new support in Duelist Nexus as well, being in the spell card, the new quick play. I forgot what it's called. The same thing with the trap. They have a new spell and a new trap. I forgot what they're called. Don't put me on it. It's up here somewhere. You'll see the names. But they just got those new cards in Duelist Nexus, and the reason why Rescue Ace is actually doing better before Duelist Nexus. Before Duelist Nexus, it was kind of a rogue deck, but now it's actually somewhat competing in this metagame, so why would you want to go hit a deck like that? Same thing when it comes to like Purely as well. I know Purely is a little bit of an older example, but when you're looking at it, it just came out this year. Their new support in Cyberstorm Axis as well, being the Black Cat in the Pretty Sleepy Memory, and they had new support in Duelist Nexus as well with the Baby Noir and the Trap card. Not a lot of people are playing the new Trap, but the Baby Noir people are definitely playing. So why would you want to hit a deck that just got new support as well? And you have to think about it. The decks that they hit and are actually older decks. Dragon Link has been in the meta for like since 2020. It's made a lot of changes, sure, but it's been in the metagame for a very long time, so I can see why they hit that. Same thing with Castria. It's been in existence since November of last year, but again, the Arise Heart got released this year in Photon Hypernova. I think that released in February, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Rise Heart's kind of an exception. That card kind of dominated the meta for the longest time. It kept a lot of decks out of the format just because of its powerful macro effect. So that's kind of an exception, is the card was just a little too strong, even though it was a fairly newer card. So yeah, so we're going to keep that. But you might be saying, well, there are older decks in this format. Why didn't they go after those? Something like Branded, Rika, and Labyrinth. There are older decks in the format that are there. Let's talk about Branded. Branded is in a weird spot because the Bestials exist and DD Crow-like effects exist. Its win con right now is basically Gimmick Puppet. And if your opponent is side decking Bestials or has like Crows or whatever, like there goes your win con right there. And then your opponent is now able to play the game. So it's kind of in a weird position as well. But Branded is also a deck that's playing newer cards as well. Think about it, there are the Chimera branded decks running around, and the new Chimera stuff got released in Duelist Nexus. So why would you want to go after a deck that's kind of making your new Duelist Nexus archetype kind of doing well with the branded stuff? So maybe that's the reason why they didn't go after branded. Rika is in a weird spot. It's an older deck, but it's not that great. As you can see in the top 16 of Vancouver, it wasn't even in the top 16. It wasn't even in the top 32 when it comes to Vancouver. It's kind of those weird things. In Europe, it's doing very good, but here in North America, it's not even doing that great. So Rika is kind of in a weird spot. Maybe you don't want to hit this deck. So yeah, maybe that's the reason why they didn't go after it, just because it has inconsistent results. And Labyrinth is kind of weird because, like I was explaining in the last kind of slide, was their top power traps right now aren't really that great when it comes to where the meta is kind of evolving, right? Dimensional Barrier is not really doing that much, except for maybe like Purely. I forgot to mention that in the last slide. Purely is really the only thing that gets hit by that. Eradicator is kind of the same thing. There's not that many decks that get hit by Eradicator anymore, so that's kind of the reason why Labyrinth kind of fell off, is because there just isn't, like, the power traps isn't doing as much as it used to do before Duelist Nexus. So it's kind of just in a weird spot. So maybe that's why they didn't hit the Labyrinth deck. So fairly, my argument is a lot of the decks in this format are newer in terms of the metagame than so that's the reason why they kept it small. They didn't want to hit the newer decks. They decided just to hit older decks instead. Now, you might be making an argument, well, look at the last list. Konami isn't afraid of hitting new decks, right? Super Heavy Samurai and Purely both got hit in the last list, even though they were fairly newer decks in terms of the meta. Now, I think you are on the right track when it comes to that, but I think you're going in the wrong direction. I believe, because a lot of people did not like when they hit a Purely and Super Heavy Samurai very early on into their life cycle. Look at Super Heavy Samurai. They're not even in the meta anymore, thanks to Scarecrow being banned. So I think that's another reason why they kept this ban list small. They didn't want to go after the new decks and then immediately kill it like they did with the last list with Super Heavy and Purely. So they don't want to make that mistake again. So I think that's why they decided not to go after the newer decks. Unlike the last time they did go after a new deck, they ended up killing it. So they decided, we're not going to do that. We're just going to let it play out this time. So yeah, that is my argument when it comes to that, on why they decided to keep the ban list smaller. So, is this ban list overhated, or is it just a bad ban list? I kind of just have to go in between that line. I think it's halfway overhated, but also halfway of a bad ban list. Obviously, if this ban list missed a lot when it comes to like banning cards, I think it missed like Calamities getting banned, the Eradicator getting banned, and Dimensional Barrier getting banned. I think they missed the mark when it comes to those cards. I think those cards should have got hit this list. But I think they did the right thing by not going after the current meta decks like Unchained and Purely and Rescue Ace and like Rika and all that stuff, just because they're fairly newer to the metagame and they kind of want to live out their cycle when it comes to the metagame. He had people like Joshua Smith arguing we maybe shouldn't even need a ban list, just because the meta is evolving to a point, like it's evolving by itself. There's really no point of changing anything right now when the meta is evolving by itself right now. So again, I have to be in the line in between. I think there's a cards that they did miss, and I can see why people hate it for that reason. But I think it's also overhated just because of they wanted the meta to change when there was really no point for the meta to be changed in the first place. So yeah, that is my video. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you leave a like and subscribe for more content on the channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.